All right.
You gonna get the spot there?
Go ahead.
Alright. So the last time I spoke, it was to inform you of restorative practices. Today I want to speak to you about restorative practices in public schools. So what is all this talk about restorative practice? Does it really work? I believe restorative practice could keep students in the classroom learning as opposed to removing them for suspension. And the RAND Corporation said restorative practices developed in the justice system as a way to mediate and repair relationships between offender and their victims are offering a way forward. Restorative practices are being adopted in schools as a means to respond to conflict and strengthen relationships in a way that is inclusive and non-punitive. You may be asking yourself, are restorative practices effective? There is reason to believe that they are. Researchers from the RAND Corporation implemented a rigorous evaluation and restorative practices being used in Pittsburgh public schools. This study entailed randomized controlled trials over a span of 2 years. The analysis focused on outcomes and program implementation. The effects were positive. Another example would be that of the failing Oakland United School District in California, which began using restorative practices in 2006. Within 3 years, the school district saw a drop in suspension by 87% and a related decrease in violence. There are 3 reasons that make me feel that restorative practices are needed in our schools. Restorative practices aid in school safety. Also, there are disparities in suspension rates for those students of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic status, and ability. And lastly, suspended students increase the risk of dropout. Let's go back to safety. Bullying, harassment, and drug abuse and antisocial behavior are all safety issues that our school authorities are confronted with. Restorative practices help to incorporate principles of human rights, democracy, tolerance, and mutual respect, and the law and peaceful resolution of conflicts into the daily practices of teaching and learning. Across all restorative practice interventions, the main aim is to resolve conflict peacefully. On a higher level, restorative practices involve members of the whole school community, involving parents, social workers, and others affected. The aim is to build a safe school through means that are more restorative than responsive. The next point I'd like to talk about is disparities in the suspension rates. Data has shown students of color are significantly more likely than their white counterparts to be suspended. 4 times more likely, actually, and 3/4 of students with disabilities were suspended at least once in 2015 and 16. Pittsburgh Public Schools programs significantly reduce suspension rates, especially in elementary students and Black students. In addition to showing less disparity towards African American students, restorative practices also have shown reduced suspensions for students from low-income families as well as female students. The last point I want to speak on is how suspension increases the risk of dropout. Since zero-tolerance policies began being implemented in the early 90s, these measures have shown that students are more likely to drop out altogether. The majority of suspensions are for nonviolent offenses, such as insubordination. In fact, from 2007 to 2008, 43% of major disciplinary action was for insubordination. Being suspended just once in the 9th grade has shown to increase dropout risk. In the same study, being suspended at all increased dropout risk to 32%. So to sum it all up, we have discussed why restorative practice contributes to safety in schools, reduces disparities in suspension, and why suspensions increase the risk of dropout. That is why I believe restorative practices should be adopted in schools. Gandhi once said, "An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind." It is time to move out of traditional punitive framework and into a framework that promotes peaceful resolution and community. In conclusion, there is ample evidence that restorative justice practices do work. My hope is that we can move out of this retributive paradigm and into one that is restorative. This shift is more likely to take place by starting in our public education system. Our young people and our future deserve this change.